all those things in there. I've been having a wonderful time. I don't know. I get you guys are my friends. We can talk like this. My spiritual life, my practice is just opening up so many interesting things almost every day, certainly every other day, or maybe once every 3 days. I'm learning something. It's I want to say that I'm learning something new, but that's not at all the case. I'm seeing something new in the old. Let's put it that way. Like each time this flower of spiritual life just keeps surprising me with a new phase, with kind of a new opening. And I'm so excited by it. I'm just so encouraged by it. I mean, I've never felt I mean, everything's changing. One is just,
Morning,
oh,
Maharaj.
good morning, good morning. Oh my gosh, Padma, you're back. Wonderful to see you.
Oh, thank you, Swami. See,
Oh
I
my.
couldn't be. I had some. I had. I'm at work.
Mm.
Well, but it's 5 o'clock. But yeah, I had some things that ran late and I couldn't join
Yes, well,
before.
no worries, no explanation needed. I missed seeing you.
Oh,
Like, it's been a while. I
I've
know,
been watching the gospel ones.
huh?
It's
The gospel is so
beautiful.
much fun. The gospel, what a treasure that book is. I mean, every time you read it, like even on the same day, I can go back and read the same paragraph and read something in there that I swore wasn't in there in the morning. It's like, what, where did that come from? But yeah, this is the nature of spiritual life. It's such a testament to the fact that we're not gaining anything new in spiritual life, that we're returning to our source, to our very center of being. Because the information that's been the most inspiring to me is not new information. It's a new way of seeing the same old information. And just that one idea, that one clue of tunneling under thought, uh, which I realize I've been thinking a lot about it, because I've been thinking, why is it that such a simple, straightforward thing that I've always read and known has never had any effect, and why now? And it's grace, of course, I'm assuming, but also um, it takes a long time, I think, of japam practice to get the mind to where it can even know what those things mean. Like before, I didn't even have an awareness of any possibility of anything outside of my mind. Like I was so firmly enveloped in thought and in what my world was, that I was trying to use those same thoughts, or those same tools, to find the meaning of the scriptures. And it's just by grace, which appears as chance sometimes, just mother, just for whatever reason. I think you have to go through a long time of quieting the mind as much as you can, or purifying the mind through your yamas and your niyamas and your japam on a daily dedicated practice, for the mind to be able to even come to a place where occasionally there can be a hole in your thought. That the basket of the woven basket of thought that keeps you surrounded and comfortable as you are, that has to give way, because you can't use, well, you can, and that's the two thorn story. You can use the mind to get out of mind, but at some point, if you just stop thinking, just stop it dead, and if any thought, no matter what the thought is, and boy, the mind is a rascal in this regard, because the mind will come up with the most important ways of giving you a thought that's necessary for your to understand. Don't believe it. Do not believe it. A thought is not necessary for seeing these things. A thought is not necessary, let alone a series of thoughts. And even this morning, I was, standing there in the shower, and I was trying, because I woke up with a very fuzzy mind. I woke up in a mind that was very centered on being tired and not wanting to be getting up. and the thoughts were just whirling, and mother was just a thought in there, and she was whirling with the rest of the thoughts, and I couldn't find that center. And so I was sitting there really trying to just come into the moment, feeling the hot water and breathing and feeling my swollen eyes and all just coming into the moment, and then just silencing. And the mind kept the whole time was constantly trying to tell me how to do it, constantly trying to tell me what to do. And you can't argue with it, because it takes engagement with mind to argue back with the mind. All you can do is just give yourself a simple no, and just kind of push like a curtain, just push the thought aside. Don't think about it, don't analyze it, just push it aside. And it's amazing how hidden something in that no thought space remains when we're in thinking mind, when we're in ego space. You just can't find it. And the worst is to go looking for it, because that's just absolutely wrong. You can't go looking for it because it never went anywhere. It hasn't left you. There's this wonderful thing about the very truth of that matter, that you are what you seek, that you are that self, you are that, and you're not looking for something. You have to slip out of the mind of delusion, the mind of all of the stories going on at one time in there. You have to just shut it all off, because if you are that, nothing has to be done to achieve that. It's just a silencing so that you can hear that, you can see that, you can be that. It's that matter of being. What are you when everything is turned off? When there's no thought, no feelings, nothing. What are you? You're yourself. And that's all we're trying. That's all what are we trying to do? It's insanity. We're not trying to do anything. We're trying to be what we already are. What an odd thing. But meditate on that, because that might help in discovering it. You are what you seek. So just keep looking inward and folding it again and again inward. Every level of thinking that stops, just keep stopping more. Keep stopping more. And when you just get down to pure sensation, where you're just paying attention or feeling the presence, or feeling the bliss, or feeling your meditation, curl that in on itself. Reject that. Understand that even that is sensory. It's sensual. Go behind that as well. It's this whole meaning of that go forward story. Yes, if you can calm the mind, that's the sandalwood. Having a calmer mind that at least isn't just constantly a barrage of desires and needs and worries and anxieties. That's calming. That is certainly the sandalwood. But then coming below that into your mantra and to the presence of God, that's definitely a step up. That's definitely your silver mine that lies behind there. And then enjoying that presence of God without the mind, and just kind of feeling it take over the self as being. You're moving toward the gold mine. And then you go even below that, where there's almost, this is where now I'm suddenly worried I'm talking too much. But you go below that, and there's it just keeps unfolding. It just keeps getting more and more indescribable, and just keeps getting more and more beautiful. It's just this thing called spiritual life. What a treasure. And what a treasure that's wrapped in plastic and newspaper. There's just no indication at all in ourselves, seemingly, that these things are there, and that they're so beautiful, so delightful, and so powerful. I really can't tell you all the things that in the last month and a half, Mother has allowed me to let go of, to drop off of. Some of my deepest desires and some of my deepest passions that have been just a barrage of gnats for my entire life, and has taken the effort to control has taken so much energy in my life, and to come to this place where I don't know what to blame. Do I blame just grace? Do I blame the secret of of realizing that everything is thought and being able to let go of that and to realize there's nothing there? When the scripture says that God is the only thing you can call your own, he's the only thing with substance. What that means, really, truly, your whole world is being held up by a belief in something that isn't there. God is the only thing that brings them into life, just like your own thinking, your own world of thoughts. Like, think of your dream. Everything in your dream is only there because you are dreaming, because you, the sleeper, are present. All of that dream exists, all of that world exists, all of those happenings exist only because you, the dreamer, are dreaming. You are the substance of the dream. Nothing in the dream has a substance of its own. It all evaporates as soon as you awake. And this spiritual life, this very unreal world that we live in, this very, very unreal world that we live in, is exactly the same. None of it can stand on its own. None of it has any substance of its own. All of it is borrowed. All of it is borrowed. And you, that self, that divine person, that wonder of love and wisdom, you hold all of this up. You hold it up. And you can let it drop. You can let it drop, and it just, all of its effect on you. Boom. It doesn't have an effect on you. It never has had an effect on you. It has, we've talked about that nothing in this world has ever touched you. You've never tasted anything in this world. You've never heard anything in this world. You've only heard symbols of all of these things. You've only touched symbols of this reality. That reality that lies behind it, that is sustaining all of it, holding it all up, is you. That's it. There's not something third party out there that you have to go control. Mother is here. Mother is here. Your everything right now is your guarantee, your proof. Mother is here. She's holding up your entire universe with her hands, holding it up for you right now. Everything you're seeing exists because she is. Everything you think you're hearing, everything you think you're touching, every story that you're telling yourself about the moment only exists because of Mother's presence in you. Only exists because of Mother's presence in you. What a marvelous, amazing, fun thing, joyful thing. It's just a delight. Even in your darkest moment, there is no darkness. You've created it and are holding on to it. And the wonder of that is you can let go of it. You don't have to have a reason. You see, the mind, this cause and effect, the mind has convinced you that you live in the world of cause and effect because that's necessary for ego. Ego can't hold on to karma without cause and effect. And so mind demands reasons for everything. You say you're happy. Why are you happy? You're in depression and you decide to be happy. You can't be happy without a reason. Look at all these reasons not to be happy. Get back in here. Get back in here where you belong. And that, the funny thing is we obey that. We think that we're subject to that because we think it's our own thinking. We think that we're telling ourselves the cause and effect. And so we hold on to it because we put our name on it. That's why it's real. But you can, this moment, decide just to be happy for no reason at all. And the reason, but what's even greater, it's not a reason, it's the isness. You are happy at this moment. At your core, the song is singing. The existence of the beloved is singing. It's at your core this very moment. All the story you've heaped over it is optional. You can obey it if you want to. But if you silence everything, stop all the stories, stop all the ideas of reason and cause and effect and all of that, just stop and claim what's your own. That's what it means to be the heir to these things. We are not beggars. We're not even students. We are heirs. and you can claim it anytime. You can have it. Just be quiet and just stop your belief in everything that's telling you otherwise. Stop believing it. Stop. That's all. Nothing magical, nothing spiritual, nothing horrendous. Just stop. And in that stopping and in that stillness, what you are and what you've always been is obvious and permanent. It's outside of the change and the flurry of the thoughts. The changing world is mind. The changing world is impure mind. Let's put it that way. The changing world is impure mind. And you're not subject to it unless you identify with it. And then you've got a horrible tyrant who's running your life and handing you one good story after another to justify all of your torment and all of your suffering and all of your pain and all these other delightful things we love to stew in for some reason. Who knows? Anyway, we're going to jump into emptiness this morning. Oh, I was going to read something to you. This actually belongs in the Vedic Christian class, but I found two more scriptures that talk very much like what we're reading in the Buddhist practice here. I'm going to read them to you real quick, if I can find them real quick. Yes. Stand aloof. This is from Theolyptus, a writing from Theolyptus, and he says, stand aloof from all things sensory, abjuring the law of your ungenerate self, and the spiritual law will be engraved on your mind. According to St. Paul, the spiritually awakened do not implement the desire of the flesh. So he who stands aloof from the senses and from sensory things stands aloof, that is to say, from the world and the flesh, is energized by the Spirit, and meditates on the things of the Spirit. One can learn of this from God's relationship with Adam prior to the fall. If you struggle to keep the commandments, persisting in the paradise of prayer and cleaving to God through continuous recollection of him, then God will release you from the self-indulgent proclivities of the flesh, from all sensory impulsion and from all forms engraved upon your thought, and rendering you dead to the passions and to the sin, he will make you a participant in divine life. Isn't that amazing? There it is. Christian Buddhism. We'll do a class next, maybe. Christian Buddhism or Buddhist Christian, who knows? Just to kind of show we can mix and match all these things. The teaching is one. Teaching is one. You choose the flavor, but the teaching is the same. That's what I always thought about Indian sweets. You can have what color you want. You can have what shape you want. You can bring it from what part of the country you want, but it's all milk that's been boiled down to its primary substance. It's all the same. And candies are all the same too. Go to the candy store. It's just a billion forms of sugar. All right. We could talk for hours on any of those things we just read. There's so much in there, the hilarity of this, but what is talking? Let's just jump in and let these things wash through your mind. Don't, I think it's what Prabhupada says. He said it about mythology, but I think it's true of all spiritual reading. It's not so much getting caught up in the dynamics of what actually is being said. It's hearing it and just letting it run through your mind, through your body, and pay attention to the residue that it leaves behind, the sweet echo that it leaves behind. There's more in that echo than there are in the words, because God cannot be caught in the words. He can only be manifested in the echo. Just a totally meaningless way of saying something. It's a poetic way of saying something that's just an odd thing. You just can't put it into a word because we don't spend our time experiencing it. So we don't have the way to think about it. But so as you hear these things, let them run through you. Mother is changing you with each one of them. You will not hear the thing itself in any words of any scripture or any teacher anywhere. It does not exist in words. It does not exist in thoughts. It's beyond that. And all of these words are just a tinking on a bell, a striking on a bell of not memory because you haven't left it behind, but a bell that resonates with your isness, with the truth. So we're trying to hear the words of scripture and teaching, and we're trying to pay attention to hear the resonance, right? And when you get sensitive to that resonance, that is the feeling of these words going through you, then you can't do anything, because that's actually your own self, that resonance, that beautiful hint that's coming to the surface. Don't objectify it. Don't become aware of the resonance. Just let go into the resonance. Just kind of let go. Let these words carry you on an echo to your own nature, which is causing the reverberation. Don't play that back for me. I'll feel like an idiot. But just hear. I've never said something so ooby groovy in my life. But but that's the thing. As we read this, as we read scripture, even don't get caught in the story. All right. Even the scripture, and in a sense, it's a video story. So it's taking us toward light. It's a good thing, but it's still a story. We're going something that's under the story. We're going something that the reason you like hearing these stories, the reason you love that class on Mother or love that class on the gospel, has nothing to do with the gospel and nothing with the class and nothing with the teacher. It has to do with the resonance that it is playing within you. It's waking up your bliss. It's waking up or making you aware of this inner world of the spirit, which is full of joy, full of grace, full of love, full of forgiveness and playfulness and sweetness. You know, they can't be offended. It can't be hurt. It is not limited. It's not subject to time. It is always the most precious and most intimate part of you, always. No matter what you think, no matter what you're convinced of, no matter what you're reasoning, it's irrelevant. This is the real, not anything else that I just listed. Very important. You've got to put your faith in that. You have to know that, because you have to let go, and you'll fall into infinity. But the wonderful thing about falling into infinity is there's no bottom. So nothing's going to hurt you. You'll just keep falling forever. All right. Emptiness. Page 135 in our Zen Mind Beginner's Mind. When you study Buddhism, you should have a general house cleaning of your mind. Yes, if you're approaching the divine nature, this is absolutely necessary. And the length of time that you have to do this is completely related to your sincerity and earnestness in doing it. You know, so if you're sincere and earnest about these practices, you move significantly faster. If you're just doing them, you might be doing them for a very long time, which is also fine, because time is just imaginary, no big deal. But once you got there, you'll kick yourself around the block that you didn't do it 400 lifetimes earlier. You think, what in the world was I doing? Running around chasing Betty Crocker and Acura Legends and big houses, when I could have been just sitting there enjoying this deeper, more satisfying business. If you want to understand Buddhism, it is necessary for you to forget all about your preconceived ideas. See, I love this. You just take that particular out of there, take the Buddhism out of there. This is what you have to do to approach your own nature, your divine, is this. You must forget about all of your preconceived ideas. To begin with, you must give up the idea of substantiality or existence. All right, now he's going very Buddhist there. And it's true from the Buddhist perspective, because we're going for that nirvanic nothingness, that emptiness, right? For the Vedantin, that emptiness is divine. It's not a zero. In Buddhism, they like to talk about it being a zero, but it's one without a second. So it's not, you can't put a value on it. You can't put a descriptor on it. So that's why it's not a super relevant point. But for Vedantists, it's always nice, especially for bhaktis, it's always nice to remember that nirvana, this emptiness, this nothingness, is of the nature of Satchitananda. So it's not a zero. There's not a zero shining through there. There is that shining through there. The usual view of life is firmly rooted in the idea of existence. For most people, everything exists. Okay, and this is the problem. This is what the Buddhists are talking about. You think that you can knock on this table, that means it exists. That's these stack of books. You can say that it exists because you can touch it, and you can, oddly enough, you can taste it, and well, you can smell it, and you can't really hear it, but there it is. And you assign your senses to it, and what your senses tell you, you believe to be real. That is the fundamental problem. You're going to your senses for your understanding of the world around you. You need to go below the senses. You define the world around you because you give it sustenance. You are its existence. You are its wisdom. You are its very isness, all right? So you have to understand that this world is ethereal. And we sort of do, but we kind of conveniently forget it because we have to in order to get along in the real world, which is another lie of your mind. That's the center of egoism, that you are necessary in order to get along in the world. You know, if that was true, you wouldn't die. You wouldn't be able to die. If you died, then the world couldn't happen anymore, which might, in fact, in one sense, be true. But we'll digress. For most people, everything exists. They think whatever they see or whatever they hear exists. Of course, the bird we see and hear exists. It exists. But what I mean by that may not be exactly what you mean. The Buddhist understanding of life includes both existence and non-existence. The bird both exists and does not exist at the same time, right? You collapse time down. That's what we say. There's nothing in this world. Everything is lying in the moment about what it is. What is a bird? Well, a bird is potting soil that can fly. What is your car? It's potting soil. What is your house? It's potting soil. You know, what's your body? It's potting soil. So yes, at this moment, the potting soil of your body is telling you that it's your body, and you're believing that to be true. How can it be true? It's potting soil. It's the same thing that built your house. It's the essence. Its essence is unreal. You know, it's changing constantly in this world. Everything is in a cycle from being compost to becoming a bird and returning back to compost again. And so don't believe your senses. Your senses only tell you a truth that's dependent upon time, that's dependent upon story, that's dependent upon position and place. You know, you don't want stories that are dependent. That's why we want a silent mind, because the mind only tells us about things that are dependent on other things. You can know that by asking yourself, what is one thing that you know that doesn't depend on anything else that you know? I did that as an exercise some 20 years ago in the monastery. I spent a good time one day in the shrine trying to think of one thing that I knew that didn't require anything else that I knew. And it will take you right down to the fundamental thought. You know what the fundamental thought is? I am. I exist. That is the only thought, that's the only piece of information that you have that's not dependent upon any other piece of information that you have. I am. And ideally and beautifully enough, it's the very name of God. And it's the first thing the scriptures tell you, that God alone exists. All else is illusory. So all else is all of the supporting thoughts that everything else in your mind depends on, but it comes down to what's that, pickup sticks? Not that pickup sticks. Anyway, some game I played as a child. You know, you keep pulling out sticks. There's a whole bunch of marbles on top of the sticks. You keep pulling the sticks out until you pull out one more than you can, and all the marbles fall through and you lose the game. So that's what the thought of God is. The thought of God is that last and final stick in there, that keeps all of your marbles, keeps all of your marbles in place. And you can see these things. They're obvious when you sit and think with a clear mind. When you start to ask yourself questions like that, what is the one thought that I have that's not dependent upon any other thought? It will take you directly to the divine. If you ask yourself, what do I know about myself that's not told to me by anything outside of myself? Follow that line of thinking. That's also a direct avenue to the name of God. So we can see clearly all these things are true. We just don't trust them because we've learned to trust our senses. And this is why our delusion is so strong. This is why it's so difficult to see these, what the scriptures say are obvious truths. Remember what Tattva says? He says, the scriptures don't exist to tell you about God. They tell you what God is not, so that that which is obvious can become apparent to you. So you see this wonderful little trick that we're involved in more of a riddle than actually than a study. We're involved in a riddle more than we're involved in a study. This is definitely a game. This is not a research paper that you're working on. You're working on a game where you don't know what you have to do. There was a game, one of the only video games I've ever really played and gotten into was way back in the 90s called Myst. And the amazing thing about the game of Myst was that you were dropped on an island as a person, and you had no idea what the game was. You had no idea what you had to do. You had no idea what the problem was. You had no idea how to solve any. You didn't know what needed to be solved. You just had to start wandering around this island, and you would just start seeing things and picking up things and reading things and hearing things. And eventually you get the idea of what's happening, of what you need to figure out. One thing leads you to the next. And, that's really the riddle. You've been dropped into a riddle here with Mother. And you don't know what's going on, but you have to walk around and you have to really pay attention. Really pay attention. Mother is all about attention. I mean, she is the attention itself, but Mother is all about that. Your attention, your ability to pay attention, your ability to be attention is key to seeing Mother, to seeing the divine in yourself. It's key because it takes you down to the most subtle parts of yourself, which are actually the loudest in some sense. But they are what sustains all of the delusion. That sounds so odd that would be the case, but it is. These fundamental truths somehow, when seen improperly, sustain all of the delusion that keeps them hidden from you when you're no longer paying attention. You see, so this paying attention is key. The bird both exists and does not exist at the same time. We say that a view of life based on existence alone is heretical. If you take things too seriously, as if they existed substantially or permanently, you are called a heretic. Most people may be heretic. You see, if you believe the world has any substance of its own, that it exists in and of itself, that's heretical thought. That's avidya. That's going to make you trust objects. It's going to make you trust feelings, make you trust sensations. And if you do that, you're going to turn to those objects, trusts, and sensations as your reality. So we don't want to do that. There's one thing. God is the only thing with substance. Your very inner nature is the only thing with substance. We say true existence comes from emptiness and goes back again into emptiness. What appears from emptiness is true existence. We have to go through the gate of emptiness. All right. This is one of those fun things about watching your thoughts, is you can't help but wonder where they're coming from. And this is a wonderfully apt description, that they arise out of emptiness, appear before you for a moment, and then decay back into emptiness again, back into that subtlety, that subtle world. And that emptiness is actually pregnant with isness. It's like the darkness of space. You know, we look at this night sky and it's seemingly dark, but it's not dark. How could it possibly be dark? There are billions, trillions, gazillions of stars, of suns in space. Space is not dark. Space is pregnant with light. Why can't we see it? Because there's nothing there to reflect it back to us, you see. There's not a mind there for it to reflect off of to us. And so we see only darkness, but the nature of space is pure light. Very interesting, you know, and St. John of the Cross plays with that. He's like, this is the truth of spiritual life. You are pregnant with the bliss of God, full of it, made of it, created out of it, drawn together by it. And yet, you know, and it reflects off ego, and ego gives it that existence, seeming light, seeming truth, seeming reality. But it isn't there. If you remove that ego, there is nothing. All of these things have no existence without your ego. They have no reality without your ego, without you believing in them, without you trusting in them. And when you remove that ego, that light goes right through you, and suddenly you're just left with one beautiful note of a song of love that has played eternally outside of time. Beautiful, just beautiful. We say that true existence comes from emptiness and goes back into emptiness. What appears from emptiness is true existence. We have to go through the gate of emptiness. Interesting way of talking about it. When he said that, I sort of felt that tinge inside where, you know, you've heard a truth that you don't understand. It's like, oh, wait, there's something in that. You have to go through the gate of emptiness. This idea of existence is very difficult to explain. Many people these days have begun to feel, at least intellectually, the emptiness of the modern world, or the self-contradiction of their culture. In the past, for instance, the Japanese people had a firm confidence in the permanent existence of their culture and their traditional way of life. But since they lost the war, they have become very skeptical. Some people think this skeptical attitude is awful, but actually it is better than the old attitude. Yeah, which is that's also an interesting thing, because there's times in spiritual life. Should I'll talk about that? I mean, way back before I was a monk, before I was a Vedantist, mostly when I was a Christian, I used to have thoughts that, like, why won't God just leave me alone? All my friends seem so happy. They all seem so content to be in the world and to join up in their country clubs and their cars and their wives and families. Why is it that I've always got a headache? Why am I always just not convinced? Or why do I feel a deeper responsibility towards something I don't understand? And I used to complain to God about it. I was like, why can't you just leave me alone? Just let me be happy. Stop bothering me with all this highfalutin stuff, you know, just let me just enjoy this world. Let me just for a minute think that it's worthwhile. You know, thankfully that prayer was never answered, but it's funny how we think that way sometimes. You know, we so earnestly believe that there's something in this world that we could enjoy. We so earnestly believe that there's something in this world that could make us fulfilled for a moment, that could give us, you know, it's what all of our movies are about, all of our books are about. All of them bring a person to a place where they're happy and fulfilled in some sense, you know, or they have some realization. But you can't, because every bit of anything you touch in the world that has any happiness in it is borrowing your own happiness to reflect back to you. It's an oddity. And so always know that if something is making you happy, know that it's impossible. This world has no existence. It can't make you happy. All it can do is find some happiness in you and reflect it back to you. And your ego will make up a story of cause and effect to explain it to you and make you believe that it was real and that it has to be found again, and that it must be discovered. But the fact is, everything in this world is borrowed from you and reflected back to you.
Swamiji, all the fairy tales end with they lived happily ever after.
Yes, and they have to. They have to. Because we would not know them, we would not be interested in them if they didn't tell us something about our nature. And our nature is, in fact, that we are living happily ever after. We're just not very convinced of it, this strange thing. But that illusion has to remain. That's how we keep ourselves deluded, is by listening to that. I will live happily ever after if I can just process all of this, problem with my mother. If I could just process all of this problem with my job, or if I could, this problem with money, or this problem with, sensual pleasures, this problem with drugs. We always have one more thing to accomplish before we can be happy. No. Any happiness that ever comes to you is a reflection of what already exists within you. If you can quiet the mind, you will find it. You will settle into it. You will wonder how it could have always been so present and so unknown at the same time. As long as we have some definite idea about some hope in the future, we cannot really be serious with the moment that exists right now. Eckhart Tolle talks about this. Ilich Yarda talks about this. If Nisargadatta Maharaj talks about this, Ramakrishna talks, everybody says this: if your happiness lies in the future, you will never have it. If your realization lies in the future, you will never have it. Why? Because the future is not real. It's conceptual. You're lying to yourself. If anything promises something in the future, it's a lie. Everything you have is now. And until you can bring all of those hopes and dreams of future into the now, he says, you can never be serious about the moment. You can never be serious about God. You can never know, because you can't know what you do not have, and you cannot know what you are not. You are this moment, and in this moment, timeless and free. You have to sort out time and give it back to the mind. You have to sort out happiness and sadness and give it back to the mind. You have to separate yourself from all of these stories and give them back to the mind, so that you can return to this present, and in this present understand what you are by being, nothing else. You may say, I can do it tomorrow or next year, believing that something that exists today will exist tomorrow. Even though you are not trying so hard, you expect that some promising thing will come, as long as you follow a certain way. But there is no certain way that exists permanently. There is no way to set up for us. Moment after moment, we have to find our own way. Some idea of perfection or some perfect way which is set up by someone else is not the true way for us. That's what I'm saying. That's what we talked about at the beginning of this, of the talk, is that there isn't a way in here. There isn't a way out there. The way is here. And you getting there is your own. You use this, right, by listening to the resonance of that self as it's poured through your mind. You learn life by listening to the resonance as life is poured through your mind, through your body. You look for that which is not changing as that story continues. You look for that which isn't moving when everything else is moving. You look for that silence inside when everything else is noisy. You let all of this waking world, all of this cacophony of senses, you let all of it point to that which is not involved. That which is not making noise, that which is not moving, that which is not thinking, that which is not feeling, that which is not tasting, that which is not hearing, that which is being inferred by everything. Everything is pointing to that. And the great riddle is you have to find out what that is. It's you, it's yourself. But what is that self? That's what has to be sorted. Because it's interesting, as an ego, even the ego itself betrays its own lie. How? Because the ego says that this whole universe is related to you, right? And so you look out at the stars and you look out at the sky and you look out at all these things and you always are thinking about those things. But understand, even egoistically, they're all pointing at you. Why is that? Why is the ego the center of its own universe? And what you come to understand is that there's some truth to it, but there's some little widget of misinformation in there that makes the whole thing distort. Because the ego will say it's me and mine that's at the center. But what's at the center is a stillness that includes it all, a space that allows the existence of material, that makes room for the stars and rooms for the planet, makes room for you. What's actually being indicated is not the ego self, a point in space-time causation. What's actually being implicated is that timeless, ever-present awareness of being, you, that, without an attribute. And everything in the universe points to it all the time. But we're not interested in what they're pointing at. We're always interested in them themselves because we think they exist. We think they have an inherent reality. So all the universe is conjuring to teach you the truth. How heavy, how thick we have to be when everything in the universe is telling us the same truth and we misunderstand it. All right, so as long as we have some definite idea about or some hope in the future, we can't be serious about the moment. Moment after moment, we have to find our own way. Some idea of perfection or some perfect way which is set up by someone else is not the true way for us. Each one of us must make his own true way, and when we do, that way will express the universal way. This is the mystery. This is why we sit here chuckling like an idiot. Because these things, how much have we talked about these things? Even in the times you and I have known each other, how many lectures have we heard? How many books have we read? How many YouTube videos have we watched? For crying out loud, it's like that's not the thing. You are anything that they could teach you, you already know. Oh goodness. Anyway, it's too fun to get caught up in all of that and just laugh and hear it all. But go beyond it. Go beyond it. Like today, sit down. You don't have to read another book. I'm not saying don't read another book, but you don't have to read another book. You don't need another idea in your mind. You have everything that you need right now to realize God. Everything. Sit with that. Marvel at that. Wonder about that. Pray about that. Do whatever you need to do. But be that marvel. I was at the Science Museum yesterday, and they have this big funnel thing that goes down, and you roll a quarter around, and it just keeps rolling around as it gets closer to that vortex. It keeps going faster and faster and faster, and then disappears. That shape, that's the scriptures, that's life experience seen from a perspective of vidya or awareness, and as you come closer and closer, gone, you're through, entering through emptiness. I imagine it's something like that. So each of us have to do it. When you understand one thing through and through, you understand everything. Can you get that? If you understand one thing through and through, you'll understand everything. Why? Because the macroverse and the microverse are the same. Any one spiritual truth requires all of the other ones in order for it to be realized. Everything is one without a second. You can't isolate anything in the universe from the whole. It cannot be done because it requires the whole for its own story and existence. You see, it's all one. And that's the lesson we're trying to learn. We cannot separate ourselves out from God. We cannot separate our existence out from the rest of the world, the rest of the universe. It is impossible because the entire universe is necessary for you. Even your ego self requires, on the whole, wrong perception of the universe for its existence. But find one truth, pick up one ideal, any one of them, the ideal of love, the ideal of joy, the ideal of beauty, the ideal of oneness, all of these things, pick any of them up and understand it fully, and you will understand everything fully because they are all one. They are not separate. When you try to understand everything, you will not understand anything. The best way is to understand yourself, and then you will understand everything. And the way to understand yourself, well, there's 4 paths for doing that. For me recently, the thing I've been working on with the largest amount of success I've ever experienced in my life is the idea of watching thought with awareness and knowing yourself to be not that story. Because the more you do that, the more tuned to silence you become in your inner life, the sooner you hear the thought arise. The more the best part is catching the lies before you actually hear them. You can hear the formation of the lie in the mind before it lies to you. And at that point, that thought, that lie has no strength, no power over you at all. And it's just easily dissipated. And your biggest struggles with your biggest problems evaporate by grace of Mother, not by effort of self at all. I can attest to this. Those things that you've struggled the hardest with, if you learn to see with awareness the mind, you will catch them before they even become a full thought. And they can be brushed with not even the movement of a hand, just the return to awareness, and they dissipate, and you are unaffected. And you come to realize that that's the way with everything. As these things arise out of emptiness, as the scriptures are saying here, at that point, without identity, without attachment, they have no power, barely have an existence. They're a vapor. And you give substance to that vapor through your attachment. The attachment of what? The attachment of that vapor to your existence. The attachment of that vapor to your isness, to your joy, to your inner self. And that's what gives them substance. That's what gives them form. That's what gives them strength. And then they just follow the stories that you've told yourself about them. At that point, they get onto a train track of samskara. They borrow everything you've thought about them in the past, and they become substantial, they become powerful, they become big, they become overwhelming, and you become small, and you become subject to, and you become ruled by, you see? But in truth, they started as a vapor within you, and you built them up through all of your assumptions to be these mighty, powerful samskaras that you can't possibly overcome. But it's a lie. It's a lie. And so this learning to sit in silence, to become tuned to silence, so that when these vibrations come up in the mind, you can see them before they even take form. And and they're gone. No power over you. No power. And all the things that are parts of that silence, you just increasingly become aware of as you just expand into emptiness, expand into this immensity. Without a story happening, there's no time. Right? If you're not reading a book, there's no time in the book, is there? Everything in the book is once, right? The whole book is there. The whole story is there between those two covers. It's all complete. It's not until you open it up and point at a particular and stick to that particular and follow it all the way through the book that the stories, the lies unfold and the story is told. And time then exists in the book, and time is defined by where your finger is on the page all the way through. But take your finger off the page, close the book. Where's the story? Where is the time in the story? Not there. It's one without a second. It's in its wholeness. Such it is with you. Your ego is the finger of your soul on the story of life, on the story of existence, the story of love, the story of God, right? Take that finger off, and the whole book is here. And nothing you can ever know from outside will be new to you. Nothing. You can see this. It's simple to say. I don't know how easy it is to practice, because right, certainly I could have done it many years ago. If it wasn't, I don't know. Yeah, let me just not talk anymore about that. But when you're having a conversation with yourself, oh, this is so very interesting to me. When you're having a conversation in your mind, like you're trying to decide whether you should get the blue apron or the yellow one. So you're sitting there having a conversation. Please ask yourself who's talking to you with the arguments about why to get the yellow apron. And please tell me who's being convinced in you that the yellow apron is the right apron. Who is it? What do you expect that voice to tell you to convince you to get the yellow apron? And what is the source of both the talker and the listener in your mind? Is it not you? What are you ever going to be able to tell yourself that's going to teach you something, or that's going to convince you of something, or that's going to help you with something? That is the duality. That's this binary world. The silence we're talking about is the home of both the talker and the listener of the mind, right? And when you come to understand that this whole world is only thought, exists only in your mind as symbols of a reality that it does not know the source of, then you know that everything in the world that you could see has the same source as the talker in your mind. And that witness that is watching everything of the senses that's presenting the world to it has the same source as the talker and the listener of your mind. The talker and the listener are delusion. They exist because of ego. You are at the origin of both the talker and the listener, the experience and the experiencer. You are there. What does that mean? That means when you are silent at that point, you know both sides spontaneously. You do not need to think about it. You do not need to ask the mind about it. You don't need to have this argument up here between non-existent entities that talk and argue all the time and create the world you live in. Come here. And you know in the moment, spontaneously, all that you need to know without all this horrible apparatus of inner argument and inner dialogue and inner thought and noise and whatnot. Think about it. Just see it as it is for a moment and laugh your head off. Because it is the funniest lack of necessity that you will ever experience when you sit there and realize that you already are fully aware of everything your thinker is telling you. There is no decision to be made. That decision has already been made. You know that. Anyway, sorry. Yes. Let's keep going. When you try to understand everything, you will not understand anything. The everything he's talking about is this whole dialogue going on up here, the back and forth between thinker and listener. Boop, 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 boop. The best way to understand yourself, and you will understand, the best way is to understand yourself, because yourself is here, right? It's the apex of this duality going on up here. So move your awareness down. Where does Thakur tell you to dive deep? Dive deep in the ocean of bliss. Where are the waves? All the waves are up here. This is where thinking is. Thinking is just the waves. Those are the waves of the ocean he's talking about. These waves of existence, the moving thought, the stories, the descriptions of the senses. This is up here. Dive deep, O mind. Dive deep, 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 deeper, deeper until it's quieter. And then when you think, am I there? Say, no, not that. Who asked that question? What is that? There's nothing there. Just shut up. Shh. And sink deeper. Sink deeper until the salt begins to dissolve. What's the salt? The salt is your samskaras, your ideas of yourself, your notions, your values, your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations. That's all your salt. Just sit in silence. Let them be dissolved by your awareness, which is the ocean. The awareness is the ocean water dissolving your salt. And come down. Come down until there's not a thinker. Come down until there's not even a witness. Come down till there's just beautiful isness, full, wonderful. Not even a, you can't talk about it because yes, it's delightful, but there's nothing to be delightful to. It's delightfulness itself. You know, you need the space of the thinker and hearer up here to experience delight and call it, oh, that's delightful. That's fine. That's happening up there. But if it's happening up there, it's not going to last. It'll come and go. But if it's here, you realize there's no conversation. There's no listener. There's no hearer. There's delight itself. And it's outside of time because it's not part of a story up here. It's not earned. It's not bought. It's not borrowed. It's isness. It's your nature. And the hearing it, the enjoying it, and the presence of it happen instantly at the same time. That's why they say, and Ramakrishna says, you know, in meditation, the triad collapses into a singularity. What is that triad? Subject, object, experience between the two. That triad, which is required by mind to tell the story, collapses into a singularity because there is no separation. And so you don't have a lover and a loved and the act of love in between. All three collapse into the moment and happen instantaneously, simultaneously, always. That's the heat of the fire and the fire itself, milk and its whiteness. This is what Thakur is telling us. These things, it's there. This is where it happens, when silence is the rule of mind. Where mind, calm mind, know me and mine, which is what no particular. The particular is what breaks and splinters and distinguishes. And that distinguishing tells the story. And that story is what we are living. It's what is blocking our vision of God. And so to understand this nature, understand this going on within you, this is yourself. And this isn't something you have to learn. This is something you just have to be quiet enough to realize. That's why they use the word realize. We're not learning anything. We're not accumulating anything. We're coming to the truth of what has always been, what is always. When you understand one thing through and through, you understand everything. When you try to understand everything, you will not understand anything. The best way is to understand yourself, and then you will understand everything. So when you try hard to make your own way, you will help others, and you will be helped by others, right? Because that distinction between you and others will disappear, and that love will be what flows. That's the beauty. All the distrust goes away, all the fear goes away, all the protectionism goes away, everything, all the insecurity goes away. Before you make your own way, you cannot help anyone, and no one can help you because you've got your story going. You've got your stereo playing at level 10. Your parents are banging on the door trying to get you to come down and eat something. You can't hear a thing. mothers banging on the door, telling you to come down and enjoy some bliss. You can't hear a thing because you've got your story at volume 10 and you're dancing your head off, you know. I have a wonderful memory of that. I can remember, I had one of those little tiny plastic box record players when I was like 13. And I would play my Donnie and Marie album on there. And I would turn my desk lamp up like a spotlight on my face. And I'd grab my highlighter marker and I would just do my concert, and in my mind, thousands of fans listening to me sing my, and they called it Puppy Love by Donny Osmond. And that little plastic record player would be turned to level 10 so that, every screw in it was vibrating in a horrible sound. But I was lost in this joy of my story. That's why it's so hard to realize God, because you love your story. You for a moment believe there's a reality in it that will manifest at an imagined future point. That's all. And that's all you have to let go of. But it's so difficult because we're so drunk on that thought of this wonderful story of being able to sing our song in front of thousands of people who adore and love us. Let go of that story. Both parts of that story, the singer and the audience, they come together here. There's nothing else. There's nowhere else. It's all imagined. It's a distortion. And if you're in the story, you think, oh, what a shame. But when you move your awareness to here, you're more like, oh, what a relief. My goodness. Finally to be that which I have always sought. Marvelous, 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 marvelous unfolding of grace. Before you make your own way, you cannot help anyone, and no one can help you. To be independent, in the true sense, yes, independent, that one without a second. To be independent in this true sense, we have to forget everything we have in our mind and discover something quite new and quite different moment after moment. This is how we live in the world. All right. Wow, we actually didn't finish the chapter. There it is. The exact same teaching that you will run to in every scripture right there. The true understanding that will come out of every scripture right there. This moment, out of which everything comes and everything returns. In the moment, the being, the center, it's the source of everything. It's, Sri Nisargadatta talks about it. He says the entire past is summed up in the present moment. And the entire future is assumed and projected from the same moment. So this moment contains both what? The listener and the talker. It's another way of talking about it. This moment contains the listener and the talker. You don't need to break it into a linear description or story based on time, space, and causation. That's mind. That's mind. You don't need to place your finger on a particular. That's ego. That's ego. And that's what subjects you to the time of the story, to the cause and effect of the story. But you are the whole story, the closed book, everything at once. And it sings in its potential all the time, deep inside. And it's yours, always and forever. And one day, you'll fall into it.